Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Cleantech. It's a roundup of the week's biggest stories you need to know in climate and clean energy in 15 minutes or less. Today's Friday, November 22nd, 2024. I'm Renewable Energy World Editor-in-Chief John Ingle. Amanda Chu from the Financial Times is joining us shortly. But for now, I'm joined once again by Cleantech commentator and veteran of the clean energy space, Mike Casey of Tiger.com. Mike, have you missed me?
I've missed you terribly, and I was extremely quippy on the last episode, and only Gerke got to see it. You didn't, because I bet you didn't even bother watching his stellar performance.
No, I'll have to take your word for it, but I believe you, and I'm sure you did an excellent job, and we're all very proud. All right, eventually Gerke probably is going to take over the show because I'll just run out of energy to keep up with you, Mike. Even though our age disparity is quite large. But for now, I enjoy this very much. And this is one of the highlights of my week.
I'm old enough to be your dad, and you're complaining you can't keep up with me.
Maybe that's Grandpa. Maybe I'll just call you Peepaw from here on out. All right.
Oh boy.
This is off to a terrible start. We want to thank those listeners who keep sending in story recommendations and nominations for Cleantecher of the Week. We'll get to that later in the show, but you can make those suggestions at rew@clarionevents.com, and you can even nominate a new co-host for Mike Casey. All right, Mike, story number one.
Matt Casey, no relation, from Latitude Media. The hidden emissions impact of grid congestion is bigger than you think. Johnny, you going to be able to hold together the rest of the show?
I will, because I'm a pro. You're not. A new report released last month provided new data on the cost and carbon pollution impact of grid congestion. So wind and solar projects are often located far from major cities. We know this, where the demand for electricity is highest. However, the power grid is often too constrained to efficiently transport electricity from these renewable projects in remote locations to urban areas. As a result, fossil fuel power plants are dispatched along transmission routes that aren't as congested. So the report finds that in Texas alone, pollution from transmission congestion was over 13 million tons of CO2 in 2022, double the amount from 2019. And that's as much annual pollution as 2.7 million gas-powered cars. So for renewables to effectively reduce pollution, we don't just need the clean energy. We need the transmission capacity to get that energy where it's needed. Some carbon accounting frameworks fail to reflect the real-world impact of congestion, leading to overestimation of pollution reductions. Michael.
Okay, substantial amount of renewable energy is being produced. That is a good thing. But the build out of the infrastructure to deliver it, as you are noting, my friend, is lagging behind. So, for example, last year, 50% of renewable energy generation across ERCOT, the state of Texas, was undeliverable to Houston, which has seen a 700% increase in data center interconnection requests since spring of this year. 700% increase. So the big problem is that grid constraints are also slowing renewable energy project development and driving up retail electricity prices. And underestimating pollution reduction from these transmission constraints makes it seem less likely of an issue for the industry. John, story number two.
Yeah, this one is a byline with Washington Post All-Stars. Evan Halper, Maxine Joslo, Megan Vasquez, and Josh Dawsey write, Trump picks fracking firm CEO Chris Wright to be energy secretary. Mike, you're right outside the Beltway. You can almost see it. What's your take here?
Chris Wright is not only a fracking firm CEO, he is a major climate denier. He runs a foundation that tries to contradict the wide and deep scientific consensus that we're cooking the planet. What Mr. Wright knows that the world's climatologists don't remains to be seen, but at a time of global crisis, this guy's nomination is about as useful as an "I still want to be friends" line in a high school breakup. Wright and DOI nominee Doug Burgum, the governor of North Carolina, are straight from the ideology over reality crowd. It will be an interesting 4 years, John. Your thoughts?
Yeah, North Dakota governor. I know you meant that. That was just a slip. And again, back to being a pro, I would have never mixed up North Carolina and North Dakota.
Thank you, sir. You're right. Doug Burgum is not from your state. He's from North Dakota.
No, we have our own challenges. All right. A few months ago, we talked about Trump's appeal to the oil industry to help raise $1 billion for his campaign, offering policy favors to big oil in exchange. Wright ended up being one of those donors, giving $273,000. Unfortunately, a large part of Wright's role would be to decide how or if we should allocate clean energy subsidies, which he strongly opposes. Wright would also have a say in lifting the LNG pause and could impact the transition to electric vehicles. On the other hand, Burgum did call for North Dakota to be carbon neutral by 2030, but through nascent tech such as carbon capture and other things that I probably don't believe in, which are prohibitively expensive and rely heavily on subsidies. The subsidies these two guys seem to not like very much. Mike, our third story.
Yeah, I will say it, but I'll just issue a challenge to Mr. Wright. For every dollar of renewable energy policy support you want to get rid of, I'd like to see you get rid of $2 of oil and gas company welfare. Our third story, Sarah Raza from the Washington Post. This seaside town will power thousands of homes with waves. Listeners, cue the new tech crabby pants John Engel. He is about to harsh like crazy.
No, he won't. No, he won't. The Department of Energy put $100 million toward a wave energy converter in Newport, Oregon that traps the power of waves and turns it into electricity. These buoyant wave energy converters are located 7 miles offshore and can deliver 20 megawatts of energy, equivalent to thousands of homes and businesses. It's so funny. I don't even write the script, but when I read it and the script writers put in, I'm a bit skeptical, they already know. They already know. Our producers know exactly what I'm going to say. I am skeptical about the economics of this technology, but I do think it's cool.
Boom.
That's not crabby pants, whatever kind of name calling we're getting into now with a man who's in his whatevers. We're not going to go into that. But right now, renewable energy in Oregon has lowered the price of electricity to about 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. But the energy from this project is expected to run 12 to 47 cents per kilowatt hour. Mike, my take has always been we should try new things and experiment, but come on, we're not there yet.
Well, Mr. Engel, I think what you're admitting to is you're becoming a bit more buoyant about new tech. I think that's good. All right. The skeptical eye could say Oregon isn't the place to deploy this tech, considering it's not competitive with other renewable energy options. However, in small remote communities that depend on expensive diesel fuel as a backup, this could be a game changer. Waves are a constant form of energy. If you live on the coast, you know that. And the converters are not visible to the naked eye from the shore, unlike offshore wind. So, plus, there's enough energy in the waves off America's coast to power 1/3 of all the nation's homes. It's a pretty big deal. So this is early days for wave energy. The sector hasn't settled on one design to standardize and scale up, but if we can lower the cost and figure out the best way to deploy this tech, this could be an essential part of our energy future. John, our fourth story.
Yeah, this one's from Robinson Meyer from Heatmap News, titled "A Court Just Broke America's Most Divisive Environmental Law. Here's what happens next." Mike.
Yep. If you want to know the behavior of federal courts these days, you would do well to read the stories about the oil and gas industry funded junkets for federal judges. These decisions and those junkets are not unconnected. When the government wants to build infrastructure, or if private actors want to build a project that involves the federal government in some way on federal land supported by federal funding or subject to federal oversight, that has to go through NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. But NEPA only mandates the government study the potential consequences of the project. It does not make the most environmentally friendly decision. And many critics now argue that NEPA is a way for NIMBYs to slow down or block projects they don't like, such as wind, solar, or transmission projects. The Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, issues guidelines for federal agencies to follow the law, and U.S. presidents have acted under the impression that these guidelines are binding. But last week, a 3-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the Council on Environmental Quality does not have the authority to issue binding guidelines. Instead, the guidelines should have the same legal authority as executive orders. John.
Yeah, so the ruling creates confusion about the legitimacy of NEPA regulations, which could lead to inconsistent application of NEPA across different agencies. Also, with no clear regulations in place, individual judges would have more discretion in interpreting NEPA requirements. A weakened NEPA could make it easier to approve fossil fuel projects by reducing the environmental review requirements and expediting permits. Expedited permits may also help clean energy projects, but confusion and uncertainty is not something clean energy developers like very much. Mike, our fifth story and our guest this week.
Amanda Chu coming back on the show from the Financial Times for Peace This Week. Lithium producer says West cannot end reliance on China in critical minerals. Amanda Chu, welcome back. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we want people to read your story. If they have not yet, what's the big takeaway you want to give them now?
Yeah, I mean, the big takeaway is that Albemarle, the world's largest lithium producer, the only operator, the only lithium mine in the US, just said that, the returns are not there for them to build out a supply chain in North America and Europe. And it's not surprising because if you see the chart for lithium prices, it's, a complete roller coaster collapse. But it really is like one of the loudest, clearest warnings that we've heard so far from a producer since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, that, it's not possible at the moment to build this out.
So, Amanda, when the Inflation Reduction Act was coming together, and even before that, Build Back Better, you could see that President Biden had these two like moral obligations for himself. That it was climate change, and then it was this kind of democratic version of America First that we saw over the last few years. And we are seeing the construction of EV manufacturing facilities, but it doesn't appear to be as far upstream as, lithium and actual cells. What's your read on the overall trajectory of domestic EV production? Was that a fool's errand from the beginning for us to think that at the state of the game that the U.S. or even North America was going to compete with China and Southeast Asia here?
I think we've thought it was going to be much easier, but I think the electric vehicle market is a little different from the critical minerals mining market. When we look at the grip that China has on critical minerals, especially refining, it's like, in the 80 to 90% across the supply chain. And unlike factories, mines face, problems when it comes to, we haven't built a new mine in the US. Last time, in the past 20 years, we've only built 3 new mines, and they've all been on private land. So that's just an indicator of just how challenging it is when it comes to permitting, siting, getting legal approvals to building a new mine. It's much harder to build, to mine and refine for lithium in the US than it is to build an electric vehicle factory. And so I think, compared to, where we were in August 2022 to where we were now, the enthusiasm has dwindled.
Amanda, you're reporting on this piece. Has it, just the long-term perspective, how has it affected your perspective on the ability of other parts of the clean energy world, the EU, the US, Canada, to balance out right now, which is a very dominant hold that China has on practically all facets of the clean energy transition?
I think the challenge is how we've designed this financial support mechanism. When the IRA was passed, the US got a lot of attraction because they had all these lucrative tax credits on the table. But you only get the tax credits once you actually enter production. And what we're seeing now is just, how difficult it is to even get to that step and receive the financial incentives. And so this is where maybe like in other countries where there's more, regulation, like in the EU, or something where, governments take a more active role in helping, companies get financing when the private market doesn't want to deploy money there. I think like something that's more active currently is needed to get a lot of these projects off the ground because right now, you know, like these companies can't even get the carrots yet in the IRA.
Gotcha. John, I think we're about out of time. We need to go to our Cleantecher of the week.
Yeah, Cleantecher of the week is Mary Powell, CEO of Sunrun. Mary was just named the 2024 Time 100 climate list of most influential leaders in climate. Time recognizing Mary for her climate leadership, advancing residential clean energy adoption to strengthen the nation's energy grid, and even before that, building up one of the most innovative utilities we've seen in this country. So congratulations to Mary.
And Mary Powell has a really good recent interview on the Volts podcast. We want to recommend that people check that out. She's saying some really interesting things about the long-term future of the residential solar installation business. So we want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, and Claire Quirin, who is pinch hitting for Brian Mendez behind the producer mic right now. Alex Peterson helped us gather these stories.
And thank you to Amanda Chu for joining this episode of This Week in Cleantech. Please subscribe, give us feedback, and share those story recommendations. And we will see you all probably not next week because that's Thanksgiving, but the week after that. See you soon. Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Amanda, thanks for joining us again. Take care.
Thank you.